Okay, no graphics on this on this presentation. There is I do have a Venn diagram I can share with you some other time. Okay, about 10 years ago, I wrote this book. This is the second edition because I added an index to it, not because it was a runaway bestseller or anything. But it's titled Sex, Ethics, and Communication, a Humanistic Approach to Conversations on Intimacy. And it was my attempt at trying to reduce some of the misery in the world. I titled it wrong. I should have titled it Young, Horny, and Conscientious. Or a book for parents to hand to their teen at the appropriate time, or preteen. Retro sex for the over-digitized and porn exhausted, which is a problem these days. Or maybe a book for older people embarking on a new relationship who'd like to get the sex thing a little better this time. So looking back on the book, it's really easy to see how many of the things in it relate to general semantics. So in my talk today, I'm just going to mention a few examples and maybe draw some implications. So first, I'll talk about indexing, which is an extensional device. Indexing has to do with how language compels us to emphasize similarities and ignore differences. Indexing reminds us that no word has exactly the same meaning twice, and that no two things are identical. To the first point, that no word has exactly the same meaning twice, words like sex or the word cheating vary from use to use. One person may use the word sex to include a wide variety of activities. Another person may think of sex as more narrowly defined. I think about young people, about 50% of them today think of oral sex as sex, and 50% think that it's not. So that's something to keep in mind. As for cheating, some people think that cheating is only a physical activity, while other people take a broader view and include online texting, sexting, flirting, things like that. So words like sex or cheating may sound simple, but they're not so simple to the different people who use them. In addition to the way indexing draws our attention to how no word has exactly the same meaning twice, indexing also draws our attention to how no two things are identical. And before I go further, I just want to note that many people have had more than one sex partner in their lives. When I was young, both of my grandparents, my grandmothers, were widowed when they were young. So the grandfathers that I met were their second husbands. So to me, this wasn't something surprising. I think some young people, they imagine that they will have one sex partner in their life, but you never know what will happen across your sexual life. And even those who set out to only have one sex partner may not end up with just one. So that said, with regard to people having sex, we should recognize that sex partner one is not sex partner two. When a person thinks that one sexual partner will be like another, they fail to index. No two sexual partners are the same because no two people are the same. In particular, people differ in their sex drive and in their anatomy. In the US, we hint at these things with jokes. We don't often speak frankly about them. In the Kama Sutra, which is an interesting artifact from ancient India, the author is a little bit more forthright. The men and women are ranked on a scale of sex drive, low to medium to high. And men and women are also ranked in terms of size from small to large. They use animals. So there's the rabbit, the bull, or the horseman, and there's the deer, the mare, or the elephant woman. And the realities of body parts and sex drive mean that there's a variety of possible combinations that work, may or may not work. And that if you fail to pay attention to these things, it can harm relationships. Irving Lee provides an instructive quotation on the matter. He wrote, "We discriminate against people to the degree that we fail to distinguish between them." So a second extensional device related to sexuality is dating. Dating is not the dating, but dating. Dating is a thing. It recognizes that no one thing is ever the same thing twice. So this is true in sex too. In sex, no one activity, or person is ever the same thing twice. You can't have the same sexual encounter twice, and you can't be exactly the same sexual partner twice. For one thing, people age. Jane 1 at 22 in college is not Jane 2 at 41 with 2 kids and a career. People also respond differently at different times. So, for example, Bill 1 early in the morning is not Bill 2 late at night. Andrew 1 with 5 minutes to spare is not Andrew 2 with an entire evening to spare. And also Jane 1 early in a sexual interaction may not be Jane 2 later on in that same interaction. So not only do people respond differently to different times, but they also respond differently to different spaces. So Mary 1 in the fancy hotel room may not be Mary 2 at her own house with kids downstairs watching a video. So along these same lines, people cannot repeat the sexual encounter even if they wanted to, or even if they tried to create the same context and follow the same steps. One of the big challenges of sex for people is to be open to the experience and be willing to have intimacy be a new thing each time they undertake it. I don't know if you saw the Woody Allen film with the lobster dinner, trying to repeat the lobster dinner, but sometimes it's better to just go for a new good experience instead of trying to repeat an old great one. Third is a third extensional device that's worth mentioning is etc. Etc. means that people can never say or know everything about anything. So regarding sexual intimacy, people often forget that at least some of the sexual practice is shaped by circumstance. Childhood experiences vary, and experiences across one's lifespan shape our understandings and our responses. Who's to say that we know everything about our own sexuality and how it might have developed differently under different circumstances, or how it might continue to change as our situation changes? The fact of etc. means that being intimate with someone is more than a physical thing. Being intimate means giving another person the context that they need in order to understand you and your responses to things. It means sharing fears and secrets and embarrassments. It means becoming vulnerable. As Wendell Johnson put it in Your Most Enchanted Listener, one of the most tantalizing truths we know is that there is so much we may never know. We simply cannot overtake the coy horizons of the sea of unawareness that surround our modest island of perception. A fourth extensional device relevant to sex is the use of quotation marks. Quotation marks are a safety device to indicate that the word is not the thing. As Robert Pula writes in his Guide for the Perplexed, quotations are used to tag terms mostly long established and in common use, which we have learned that either label fictions or mislabel something that we need to talk about. For example, with regard to sex, what is foreplay? This term deserves to be in quotation marks. What differentiates foreplay from play? Doesn't calling some activity foreplay make it seem like a chore, like it's not really play? It's just what you have to do before the play. As much as the word foreplay tries to be useful, doesn't it also disenfranchise certain kinds of sexual activity? So as long as we're at it, what's normal? Who knows these days? Does what we see in the media reflect what really happens behind closed doors? In many ways, the map is not the territory. On the other hand, the territory is now starting to resemble the map. I say that because, oddly enough, sex is now more like pornography for some young people. Because pornography is everywhere online, young people are taking their cues from pornography about what's desirable and what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to tolerate. And because erotic energies are malleable, all sorts of new kinds of turn-ons and experiences and expectations are being manufactured. So normal, indeed. And the next term from general semantics that we can bring to bear on the topic of sexual intimacy is semantic reaction. Semantic reactions are reactions to words, language, and other symbols and events. The reactions can range from symbolic and human to instinctive and animal. And the important thing about semantic reaction is that they are habitual to us, but might be worth interrogating. Semantic reaction is a huge challenge for sex-related speech. Despite the constant hum of sexualized talk in media and advertisements in the US, people are still afraid of talking honestly about sex. It's not the words they avoid, but using them seriously. In public, they know they might be laughed at or be slut-shamed. In private, they fear embarrassment. People know sex is political and they don't want to be seen as political. Many young people prefer hooking up to talking openly about sex. So many young people have a hard time just looking up, they have a hard time looking up from their phones and making eye contact. You can imagine how hard it would be for them to be more intimate. So this fear of people's reaction to sex talk cuts down on communication before, during, and after sex when it might be useful for future intimacy, and it cuts down on building a person's own understanding of sex because we're not willing to talk it through and think about it. I also had something here about the IFD disease, but I'm going to skip that because it's a little depressing. And because we have had we spent some time, but I'd be happy to share the example for you. But I'll get to the gist of it. So what we might draw from some of these observations, we can put on our general semantics hat and give a few suggestions to our hypothetical man and woman, and to others. You don't have to be straight for these examples, I don't think, regarding sex and sexual communication. This is the kind of advice that I think people like Alfred Korzybski, Irving Lee, Wendell Johnson, Robert Pula, and other general semanticists might give. So here goes. First, try to be intimate only with someone you like or love, and with someone who likes or loves you. Second, whatever you understand sexual activity to be, try not to expect any particular ideal result from it. Third, try to figure out what feels good either by yourself or together and be honest about it. So that means don't fake orgasms. And that goes for men and women. Fourth, find other things to barter with in your relationship besides sex. Fifth, remind yourself why you're grateful for your partner. Six, prefer weed to alcohol, but only if it's legal and if you're so inclined. 7, have a sense of humor. 8, finally, 8, try to accept what's outside your control. And 9, bring a hopeful attitude to your intimacies. And that's my talk.